John, one of the options at right guard may be right there in the draft, and one of the biggest risers, not only because of his glorious mullet, but because of his performance. I think it kind of stunned some people about the athletic profile that he put forth at the combine. Mr. Tate Rutledge, a guy who knows a thing or two about Amarius Mims and playing with him, and a guy who comes from the SEC, good pedigree. That could be a guy, John, that the Bengals start looking at. You know, they like those Georgia guys. They have a good relationship with that program down there, it would seem, and they've drafted a lot of guys. And this guy just fits the mold. I'm going to bring up some stuff on him here, and we'll talk about that. But this was one of the guys too, John, if you remember, that we talked about as guys we're watching going into the combine. And lo and behold, the guy really helped his stock. That is for sure. This last weekend at the combine, I think he did really well in some drills, proved to be a better athlete than I think some people thought he would. He was. And so you go back and you got to look at the tape, and there's some tape things that we'll show here, but you can see here just some stuff. 6'6" is kind of where he measured. 308 is what I think he weighed in at the combine, but he's played at 320. He is older. He turns 24 in April, right around the draft time. So he is older. He was a first-team All-American last year and a first-team All-SEC player the last 2 years, and of course, a two-time national champion with the Bulldogs. Is that age a concern? I mean, we've talked about that with Cordell Volson. I see that he anchors really well. He tested better athletically than some thought. I think he's got throwback guard mentality, not just because of his mullet and his tats and all kinds of stuff, but he's just throwback dude. I think he's a day one starter, especially with that athletic profile. He's always looking to take somebody out. His head's on a swivel, as they say, just always looking to find someone to hit. And we'll see a couple of clips here. Here's the RAS profile from Kentley Platt, aka Math Bomb. You can see there the unofficial 9.97. And then you see that, look at the composite, the 40-yard dash, the 20-yard split, the vertical and the broad. Did not do the bench, but I think his strength kind of speaks for itself on the tape anyway. But, really good profile that he put forward. And I think a lot of people were like, wow, okay, let's talk about this guy a little bit more. We were talking about maybe round 3, round 4. Did he sneak himself into round 2? Here he is, top of your screen there, just takes out the linebacker that's coming through against Clemson. Not a big gain, but a nice play. This one again towards the top of your screen. He kind of he passes one guy off as a little late on this, but still holds up just enough for a touchdown throw. I believe that's Carson Beck there that's throwing that. Bottom of your screen there, just stands pat, and that's a big boy he's going up against in Tennessee. And this was a big play in the bowl game there. Nice catch by the receiver. And then you just got a bully. You see him all the way out front, just take out that safety by, just puts him on his butt. And then here, this is a fun one. I almost want to do this in full speed, but he sees this guy coming across and just takes him out, and that guy lands on his butt there as well. So, and we could bring those back up, but sometimes he just wants to be a bully, and I love it. He just finds a guy, and I love, like you saw at that last clip, he had a guy in front of him that he was kind of looking to make contact with, and he saw that the guy was kind of looping around the tackle there, and he took him out. And then, the big play where he lumbered up the field, all the way up the field, and took out the defensive back in a play just because. I liked him as a third-round pick. He might have snuck himself into the second round with this testing. Obviously, there's some more stuff with the pro day, but I could see this guy, especially, I almost look at the age as not a concern when you see the athleticism and you see the pedigree and the conference that he played in, because now you got a guy, it's like, Mims, there was question, do you got to develop him? There was not as many games played by Mims, that sort of thing. This is a guy, I think it's a plug and play situation, especially because he tested better than a lot of people thought.
Yeah, and he was one of the only handful of confirmed meetings the Bengals had with interior offensive linemen. The other one was Jared Wilson, who played next to him at Georgia at center. I kind of feel like it's rather unlikely. I think the Bengals are going to draft a center, so maybe part of that meeting was getting more intel on Rutledge, which I don't think is completely out of the question. The Bengals have done that with several other guys in the past, but obviously they were extremely familiar with Rutledge already because they watched a ton of tape on him while watching Amarius Mims last year and then falling in love with Amarius Mims. Rutledge was pretty much just as locked down of a pass protector as Mims was when they both played together in 2023. Like you said, he's on the older side because he didn't play his first 2 years at Georgia, but then he became a starter in 2022, had a pretty decent year, built on that, and had the best year of his Georgia career in 2023 when he was fully healthy. In 2024, he suffered, I think, a bad ankle injury very early in the season, very reminiscent actually of Amarius Mims from a year prior, but he came back and I think he finished the year really strong, particularly in the Sugar Bowl. Like his tape was pretty solid in that game, but one of the, just like we talked about with Luke Kandra a couple weeks ago, very balanced in terms of his production for both pass and run blocking. I think he has the strength, obviously, to hold up in pass protection, but he's got the movement skills and the power to move and displace people in the run game. I think he's like, I think you were kind of alluding to it as well. Like in pass protection, he just moves with a lot of confidence, which I think is the case with some elite athletes who are very comfortable with their game. Obviously, the chemistry with him and Mims already exists, and I think that's something that would attract the Bengals as well. His arm length was interesting to me too, because pretty much all the tackles that the Bengals met with, like, had really long arms. Like, and this is not really necessarily a class with a lot of long arms and long athletes, if you will. But at guard, it doesn't seem like that was necessarily a prerequisite because his 32.25-inch arms is a little bit on the short side, but obviously that's more negated the closer you are to the center position. But yeah, so someone that I think could have declared last year and been a pretty early pick because of how well he finished 2023, but he decided to come back. Unfortunately, got injured, but like you said, with this combine performance, I really don't think he'll leave. He definitely won't leave the second day of the draft. He might not even leave the second round.
I look at it as, this kind of has, and granted, Scott Peters is new, so, we have yet to see kind of exactly what he looks for in his offensive lineman, but I see SEC, polished guard, Georgia, a position of need, obviously, and a guy that I think could come in and start. Is he going to be all pro? Is he going to be numerous Pro Bowls? I don't know about that. I just see a solid player with a mentality that I really like. I said throwback. I just see an old school lineman with new school athleticism, right? I mean, that's kind of what I see out of him. And I think he's a guy, whoever lands him, I think he will be a good player for them should he stay healthy. And I see a lot of things that point the Bengals' direction for a player like this. Well,
I actually did a mock draft this morning, and he was the second round pick in that mock. So I do, the ties are definitely there. I think there's an allure to, if you're going to have a new starter play next to Amarius Mims and you want a guy with higher upside, might as well get the guy that he already knows, right? And obviously Mims proved to be a decent scheme fit. I think Rutledge would be very similar with whatever scheme that Scott Peters wants to implement there. But you talked about upside and ceiling, and yeah, it's very obviously premature to declare anyone like an all-pro necessarily, and it's not really good business to do that. But when you look at offensive linemen, the guys who have the best chance of reaching that ceiling are the elite athletes. It doesn't matter how far back that you go. Like, those are the guys that have the best chance of doing that. So that's why we were so high on Amarius Mims last year, which, by the way, the difference between the athleticism levels for Georgia and Alabama offensive linemen are like so stark. It's bewildering to me because we just had Tyler Booker, the guard from Alabama, just not really do well at the combine. And that's been the common thing with Alabama. As with Georgia, Jared Wilson ran like a 4.8 40. Amarius Mims obviously was a freak. So the differences in those two programs is interesting in that regard. But no, like, even if Rutledge doesn't hit that immediately, he does have a chance of reaching that type of an outcome because of how quick and explosive and fast he is as an athlete. Obviously, offensive linemen don't run 40 yards down the field every single play. Like, that rarely happens. That's not the point, though. It's to show the case that you do have that athleticism in you, and so long as you have the power and the hand usage to kind of match it, you have a really good chance of being a really good player.
It's interesting you bring up Alabama and the athleticism thing. That was kind of the deal with JC Latham last year. Remember, he wouldn't run, he wouldn't do certain drills, and that was kind of a little bit of a red flag. And the name escapes me a couple of years ago that the Raiders drafted him, that was linked to the Bengals offensive guard, Alex Leatherwood. That was another guy that the Bengals were kind of linked to, and there were some questions about his profile as well. But yeah, I mean, I think he's a very clean prospect. If I guess to use a very shticky type of descriptor for him, but I just think he's clean. I think he'd be a solid pro. And like you said, that is another key, that if the Bengals maybe don't land a veteran free agent or a high level free agent to man that starting right guard spot in outside free agency, this could be the guy then okay, you got a veteran there that is, your starter, but you want to provide some immediate competition. This guy could come in and bring you depth. If you get your left guard settled in free agency, with the Cordell Volson situation there, you can get this guy at right guard and start him. And I think that point that you brought up about, you get a little hesitant sometimes about starting rookies right out of the gate, a lot of times. But if you were to do that, starting him next to Mims, they know their styles of play. I think that makes a lot of sense.
100%. Rutledge really only played right guard in college as well. Like, I think he logged at 4 total snaps at left guard, but obviously that doesn't always matter. Like we just talked about, like Wilson never really played left guard in college either. So it really just depends on where peers would want to put him. But yeah, fit and landing spot matters so much in terms of how these guys actually hit their potential, and going to an offensive line coach that's revered for his quality of developing and teaching technique and the familiarity of playing next to someone that you already know in an offense that I think kind of fits what his skill set is as a really high level pass protector. There's not a lot of better fits than the Bengals for Ratledge.
Yeah, I like them. We'll see if they do that. If they go defensive line maybe in the first round, and then they look at ideally for the Bengals' sake, you would have thought, okay, maybe this is a third round guy, but I don't know. I don't know that I see that now, based on how we tested in Indy. So a lot more to go on in the process, absolutely, but a guy to definitely keep your eye on, Tate Ratledge from the University of Georgia for the Bengals right guard spot. Let's